Now, as promised, the news in detail will begin with our top story coming out of Afghanistan, where 24 people have been killed in an explosion near President Ashraf Ghani's election rally in Parwan province. Health officials say 30 others have been wounded in the blast at the Charikar city rally. Local hospital authorities say women and children are among the dead, and most victims seem to be civilians. A spokesman for the provincial governor, Wahida Shahkar, says the blast was caused by an IED in a security vehicle. In the meantime, another blast in the Kabul city center killed at least 3 people. No group has claimed responsibility for the blast so far. U.S. President Donald Trump, meanwhile, says it looks like Iran was behind Saturday's attacks on Saudi oil facilities, but he says military retaliation for the drone strikes is not yet under consideration. Speaking to reporters at the White House, Trump said the very large attack could be met with a much bigger response. Trump said he will send Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to Riyadh to discuss an appropriate reaction. Meanwhile, NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg has expressed extreme concern over the potential consequences of that attack. But Iran has dismissed the allegations, saying Saudi Arabia wants war to distract from its internal problems. The U.S. says the international oil market is resilient and will respond positively to the attack on the Saudi oil industry. Speaking at the International Atomic Energy Agency headquarters, U.S. Energy Secretary Rick Perry blamed Iran for the attack. Perry condemned the attack while calling Iran's behavior intolerable. He said the U.S. is prepared to release oil from its strategic reserve.
Despite Iran's malign efforts, we are very confident that the market is resilient and will respond positively. President Trump has authorized the release of oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, if that is needed, and my department stands ready to respond.
Meanwhile, Iran's President Hassan Rouhani says recent attacks on the Saudi oil facilities are a response by the Yemeni people against aggression. Yemen's Houthi rebel group have already claimed responsibility. This report has more.
Many questions remain unanswered about the pre-dawn attacks on Saudi Arabian oil facilities that sent crude prices skyrocketing. The U.S. swiftly blamed Iran for the attacks without offering evidence. The claim was rapidly rejected by Tehran, which insists it is not behind the attacks. At a news conference in Ankara, Iran's President Rouhani said the Yemenis are exercising their right to self-defense.
Yemeni people are exercising their legitimate right of defense. The attacks are reciprocal, and the main solution is to halt these attacks. The solution for Yemeni crisis is also political. We believe in that.
Earlier, the Saudi-led coalition said initial findings show Iranian weapons were used in the attacks. Coalition spokesman Colonel Turki al-Malki says the probe revealed the strikes did not originate in Yemen.
Initial investigation indicates that the weapons used in the attack are Iranian. The results of the investigation would be immediately made public once they are complete. The drones did not, like what the Houthis claimed, take off from Yemen. The Houthis is a merely tool for hands of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps.
Maliki said such attacks pose a threat to regional stability. He urged the international community to take action to ensure the safety of regional oil production and global energy.
Well, for more on that story, we're now joined by Abbas Aslani, who is a Tehran-based political analyst. Abbas, thank you for your time today. President Donald Trump, Abbas, has blamed Iran for the drone attacks on Saudi oil facilities, but he ruled out a war on Tehran. Do you see a policy shift in the U.S.?
Well, Americans, they have tried to use every opportunity or incident in order to create a coalition against Iran because they have failed to do so in the past. opportunities. They wanted to gain the support from different countries in order to create a kind of group or coalition to secure the region for the vessels and the ships movements in the waterway of the Hormuz. But they failed to do so, and now they are using this incident as a potential to contribute to that process. When it comes to the retaliation against Iran, we have been some remarks or even tweets by the American president, which has been somehow heated and very tough. But when it comes to the practical steps, Americans, they might be thinking of a quick, short, and surgical attacks on Iran. But Tehran has made quite sure that if there is a military attack against the country, it will retaliate strongly. So this makes Americans to hesitate to start a war with the country, because American President Donald Trump is ahead of the presidential election in the country and he wants re-election. That's why I think they will not be after a military conflict with the country.
Abbas, as you know, Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has also ruled out talks with the U.S. at any level. Is this decision in favor of Tehran?
Well, I would say that this is not something new, and Iran, I think, is going the right path and is no other option but to do so, because that is not Iran who left the negotiating table. Iranians are yet at the nuclear deal, and they are at the negotiating table. They talk to the remaining members of the nuclear deal, and the issue is that the Americans themselves left the negotiating table and the nuclear deal, which was a framework for the talks and dialogue. And if they want to resume those kind of dialogue and talks with Iran, I think they need to return to that negotiating table. And this is not something strange and not new. Iran has had this position since as of the past so far. So I think if Iran ignores this nuclear deal and engages in new talks, I think that will be undermining the process which took 4 years to achieve. And moving in that direction and framework, I think, will best secure the interests of all parties to the deal. And this can be the only logical way to go forth.
All right, Abbas, thank you very much for your time and for sharing thoughts here with us at Indus News. Let's move on with the news now. Russia has offered advanced weaponry to Saudi Arabia following those Saturday attacks on its oil installations. President Vladimir Putin says it is up to Riyadh to make what he called the wise decision to buy leading Russian air defense systems. At a press conference in Ankara, Putin pointed to the purchase of the Russian systems by Iran and Turkey as evidence of their effectiveness. He said the attacks on Saudi Arabia were not discussed during his talks on Syria with the presidents of Turkey and Iran. Putin said the Yemen conflict should be resolved through negotiations between all sides. Meanwhile, Bahrain has signed an agreement with the United States to purchase its Patriot missile system. Crown Prince Salman bin Hamad Al Khalifa made the announcement during a meeting with President Donald Trump at the White House. The Crown Prince says Bahrain wants to strengthen its trade ties with the U.S. The Patriot system is a long-range missile defense aimed at countering tactical ballistic missiles. U.S. President Donald Trump says he will soon meet the prime ministers of Pakistan and India to discuss tensions over Kashmir. Speaking to media in Washington, Trump said progress has been made to reduce tensions between the two countries. Trump's schedule suggests he will meet Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan later this month on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. Last week, the U.S. president repeated his offer to mediate the Kashmir dispute between Pakistan and India. Relations between the South Asian neighbors have been tense since India illegally annexed occupied Kashmir on August 5th. Islamabad says the Kartarpur corridor for Indian Sikh pilgrims will open on November 9th. Pilgrims will be able to use the opening to attend celebrations marking the 550th anniversary of Guru Nanak, the religion's founder. Project Director Atif Majid says 76 immigration counters have been set up to issue visit visas, to 5,000 Sikh pilgrims a day.
Alhamdulillah, we have achieved 90% of the achieved target, our desired target. And because we have to complete phase 1 by 9th November, when we're going to have another inauguration, inshallah, before the Babaji's celebration, the 550th celebration.
Well, the corridor includes roadways, an 800-meter bridge over the Ravi River, and an immigration office. Amnesty International has vowed to defy the Indian government's attempts to silence its criticism of human rights violations in occupied Kashmir. New Delhi has recently accused Amnesty India of violating foreign exchange regulations by receiving funds from its London-based parent organization. Amnesty International's Secretary General Kumi Naidu says the Modi administration has worked hard to stifle Amnesty's work in India. Criticizing the blackout in the valley, Naidu said it was a horrific act by the Indian government to cut off legitimate communication. Human Rights Watch has also called on India to release Kashmiris illegally arrested. 27 members of the U.S. Congress have so far voiced criticism over the 6-week crisis in Indian-occupied Kashmir. Let's now get to some other news. Israelis are voting today to elect a new government there. Snap elections were called after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu failed to cobble together a coalition after polls in April. Locked in a tight race against Benny Gantz and with corruption charges hanging over him, Netanyahu is fighting for political survival. In a last-ditch bid to attract far-right votes, Netanyahu pledged to annex most of the Palestinian West Bank if re-elected. That pledge has been met with outrage from most Muslim countries. Former military chief Gantz had no previous political experience before declaring his candidacy in December. About 6.4 million Israeli voters are eligible to cast ballots for 120 seats in the Knesset. 31 parties are contesting today's elections. And coming up next in this news bulletin, environmentalist Reliant vows to clean up Thailand. And the Syrian pound continues to fall against the dollar. Welcome back. We're going to begin this half in Britain, where the Supreme Court is hearing petitions against the suspension of Parliament. Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he will wait for the verdict before deciding whether to recall the body. In the emergency hearing, 11 of the court's 12 judges will consider the case. People held a protest outside the Supreme Court before the hearing. Two politically charged actions accused Prime Minister Johnson of breaking the law by proroguing the House of Commons. They say Johnson advised the Queen to disband Parliament in order to stifle moves to block a no-deal Brexit on the 31st of October. Earlier, the London High Court agreed with the House of Commons suspension, but Scotland's Court of Appeals later ruled it illegal. Italy's far-right league has promised to unleash a battery of referendums to sink reforms planned by the new government. Disgruntled former Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini has denounced former coalition allies as traitors. Addressing thousands, Salvini promised to force referendums to undo planned legislation, including a change in the electoral law. Dubbing Prime Minister Conte a traitor, Salvini said he is acting against the national interest to please France and Germany. Speaking in the small northern town of Pontida, the League leader suggested he has fallen foul of an EU plot. Referendums have to be held in Italy if at least 500,000 voters petition for one. The EU has begun formal proceedings against Hungary for alleged breaches of the bloc's values and the rule of law. Budapest is accused of imposing restrictions on media, judges, academics, minorities, and rights groups. European ministers have met in Brussels for the first formal hearing on Hungary. The hearing is looking into the country for violating the rule of law, known as an Article 7 investigation. The inquiry could lead to the suspension of Budapest's EU voting rights if other bloc members agree. But Hungary has strongly rejected the accusations, calling them politically motivated. The European Parliament kick-started proceedings against the Central European country a year ago. France, meanwhile, has announced a $66 million aid package for Sudan. Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian also offered to help the country tackle its foreign debt. Le Drian held a press conference alongside his Sudanese counterpart, Asma Abdullah, in Khartoum. He said the bilateral talks focused on fixing the Sudanese economic crisis. He also said France will lobby for Sudan to be removed from the U.S. list of countries it considers state sponsors of terrorism. That listing prevents Sudan from receiving much-needed financial aid from international donors. Elsewhere, 15 villagers have been killed after a truck fell off a cliff in southern Philippines. Police say 11 others are in critical condition. Police officials said the vehicle was traveling downhill in South Cotabato province when its brakes failed. They said the vehicle was carrying about 30 passengers home from a beach trip at the time of the accident. Rescue officials said young children are also among the victims. 26-year-old Nigerian woman Gloria dreamed of a better life. She left for Europe with 4 other women. Only 2 of the friends survived the torturous journey to Libya before becoming stranded there. Find out what happened in this report.
Gloria once dreamed of an international career in fashion, but since her return from Libya to Benin City in Nigeria, she has been working as a seamstress on an assembly line in a tracksuit workshop, earning just $40 a month. Like many Nigerians who try to escape poverty, Gloria's journey to Europe was cut short in Libya.
My dad just had the belief that if I travel out, I'll be able to help the family. So when I came back, it's only him I told that look at what I went through. As I did, they asked me, I tell them, it's normal.
Like Gloria, 14,000 young Nigerians stuck in Libya have returned home since 2017, thanks to a United Nations programme. The state of Edo provides them with about €100 to get back on their feet. The state has also created training programmes to encourage reintegration.
It's a priority for us to give returnees and young people that could be potentially migrating jobs and opportunities that they are interested in, things that they would like to do, and not just things they would like to do. We don't want them just engaged. We want them to be able to see potential for growth.
In Nigeria, more than half of under 35s are unemployed. More than 60,000 Nigerians are still stranded in Libya. The vast majority are still in detention centres or in the hands of traffickers and local militias.
Well, in Thailand, environmentalist Raline Sadanasaran, also known as Lily, has taken up the challenge to clean up her country. Little Lily started her anti-plastic campaign at the age of 8. Bangkok's young activist wants Thailand free of single-use plastic by 2020. More on that now in this report.
This area of Bangkok is known as the city's green lung, but it's suffocating under plastic, like much of the country. Lily is just 12, yet she's leading the fight to clean up the city, inspired by young Swedish climate change superstar Greta Thunberg.
Greta is really important to me because what she symbolizes, she says that kids can make a difference. She wants everybody to do something, and she got so many people together.
Thailand's the world's 6th biggest polluter of the oceans. Every Thai person uses on average 8 plastic bags a day. Lily is taking her message to the top. She has led several sit-ins outside the government house, met with business leaders, and she spoke at this UN conference.
It is hard, but I like to be positive about it because there's always hope. We can always fix something. If there's a problem, we fix it.
Lily's goal is to ban single-use plastic bags by 2022. Her first victory, managing to convince a supermarket chain in Bangkok not to offer plastic bags 1 day a week.
Well, in Washington, teenage climate activist Greta Thunberg has received Amnesty International's Ambassador of Conscience Award for 2019. The award celebrates individuals and groups working to protect human rights. The 16-year-old Swede with Asperger's syndrome runs a movement called Fridays for Future to spread climate change awareness. She has been skipping school every Friday to protest outside the Swedish parliament, demanding action to tackle the climate crisis. That movement has now spread via social media to young people in other countries.
I think there is an awakening going on. Even though it is slow, the pace is picking up and the debate is shifting.
Business news now. The United States has reached an initial trade agreement with Japan on tariff barriers and digital trade. President Trump says the agreement can be implemented without congressional approval. In a letter to Congress, President Trump informed lawmakers the deal would be made under trade law provisions. This allows the U.S. president to make reciprocal tariff reductions. Last year, the Trump administration notified Congress it would pursue negotiations with Japan under the new method. Trump says he will be entering into an executive agreement with Japan regarding digital trade. His letter, though, did not disclose any contents of those agreements. International oil prices have been trimmed after a market panic about Saudi supplies sent them surging 14% yesterday. Global benchmark Brent crude futures are trading about 0.5% lower, while U.S. crude is down by nearly 1%. European stock markets have opened flat as investors maintained funds in safe havens. London, Frankfurt, and Paris are practically unchanged ahead of a meeting of U.S. Federal Reserve policymakers. Earlier, the Shanghai Composite closed nearly 2% down on fears of a conflict between the U.S. and Iran. The Hang Seng Index was also 1.5% lower after Hong Kong's economic outlook was downgraded by Moody's. The Nikkei 225 in Tokyo was flat following a U.S. announcement of a trade deal with Japan. Now, as the war in Syria goes on, that country's economy can no longer sustain its people. Shops that once were bustling with activity are now wrecked reminders of happier days of the past. This report now has more.
The civil war has battered Syria's finances and depleted its foreign reserves. A flurry of international sanctions imposed on President Bashar al-Assad's regime and associated businessmen at the start of the war has compounded the situation. Syrian media puts this down to a high demand for dollars in neighboring Lebanon, whose banking system is used by Syrian importers for their own transactions.
The increase in the value of the dollar makes the Syrian pound increase 20, 30, or 40 Syrian pounds per day. Prices change every hour. So the customer who came yesterday and bought at such price can come back today and will buy the same thing for more.
Shop owners say business has slowed since the value of the Syrian pound plunged to its lowest level this month. The black market value of the Syrian pound on 8th of September stood at 691 against the dollar. The following day, it climbed to 610. When the 8-year civil war began, the rate stood at around 48 pounds to the dollar.
The variation of the exchange rate means that when I want to buy 50 kg of this or that product, I lose 10 kg and I am only able to buy 40 kg for the same price. There is no stability, so we have to wait a bit for it to buy. But if you wait, your store slowly becomes empty.
In the Kurdish majority city of Qamishli in northeast Syria, the situation is just as grim. Last week, the government agreed to take legal measures against foreign currency dealers who manipulate exchange rates. But no one knows for sure when the situation will improve for ordinary people.
Time now to find out what the weather is like around the world. And with that, you're all caught up. Thank you for watching this news bulletin here at Business.